Hi, everyone. Let's get started. Welcome to our stress-free test prep webinar for Virginia educators. We are so excited to have you here with us today. My name is Alyssa DiVincenzo, and I will be your host this afternoon. I'm the Community and Social Media Specialist here at Edulastic. We also have Jenna Tinzola on the line with us today. She's an Edulastic Technical Support Specialist and will be able to tackle some of your questions directly in the Q&A box and in the chat. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be here, and as we all prepare for the upcoming state testing season. Next, please, Jenna. We're also lucky to have two wonderful educators with us today, Aaron Merrill and Nicholas Hamilton. Like you, I'm excited to hear their tips and tricks for getting ready for tests. Next, please, Jenna. Edulastic is a great assessment tool to help you get your students ready for state testing. Edulastic features over 50 tech-enhanced question types, over 90,000 items in the Edulastic Certified Item Bank, over 60,000 assessments in the test library, standards tracking, mastery reports, player skins that look almost identical to the look and feel of your state tests, and many more features available to you once you join Edulastic. Next, please. As you all know, Standards of Learning measures your students' ELA, math, science, and social studies skills through grades K through 12 in Virginia public schools. Edulastic's library of released test items is a great resource to access practice questions for these standardized tests. Next. To find Virginia-related items, you may log into Edulastic, go to your test library, clear your filters, and search Virginia DOE. If you would like a live demo of how to do this and how to navigate step by step, please let us know in the chat and I will be happy to do so at the end of the presentation. Next, please. All right, now the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm excited to turn our presentation over to our wonderful educators. First up, we have Aaron Merrill. Aaron is a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher. Without further ado, I'm turning it over to Aaron.
Afternoon, everybody. All right, so we were asked to come up with tips and tricks to help you guys as we all prepare for those wonderful end of the year SOLs. Looking at the chat, I can see a lot of different subject areas. Sadly, no social studies teachers, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on, but we can still make it work. Go ahead, next slide. So my focus today is going to be how to use the data that Edulastic can compile for you. As Alyssa already said, Edulastic has things directly in from the DOE with our release tests, as well as ways for you to tag questions that you write yourself with whatever SOL strand you want. So I am a big fan of data. I know a lot of teachers get headaches about it, and so I'm trying to make something quick and easy for you to think about or work with so that as you're using Edulastic throughout the year, or even just for end of the year test prep, what you can do with it to make sure that you're doing less work at your end and making the students more accountable and more confident in what they're going to be doing. Okay, next slide. So just some things that I know teachers have thought about, especially if you are like Prince William County and heading towards that wonderful standards-based grading initiatives. I'll let you guys look at those. And this is definitely something I'm open to answering. If you feel like I don't address any of these topics as we're going through, definitely shoot a message in the chat. I don't know if your counties are harping on this, but in ours, whenever administration or instructional rounds come to our schools, they always ask the students 3 questions. What are you learning today? Why is it important that you learn it? And how will you know when you've learned it? And so that's something that we have to train our students to know, which is why Edulastic is so helpful, because having these data notebooks that I'm about to show you is an easier way to show in a visual form. Here's what I'm learning and how I will know if I've learned it, rather than just saying, I don't know, I'll pass the test, which is a common answer. Okay, next slide. So a few years ago, pre-pandemic, for my professional growth plan for the year, I decided to come up with a way for students to keep track of their own data. I had come from a a system where we were originally told to keep track of everybody's test scores on every assessment. I'm sure the English and math teachers have had this going through well, as if you've been teaching more than 5 years. And originally we had to have walls of data and charts and things. And especially at the middle school level, the students get incredibly embarrassed by that. They're so self-conscious at this age. So my solution was to create the data notebook. And it's not super Pinterest perfect. It's just a couple page packet. I can screen share if we need to, but I do have a shot of one of the pages on the slide right now. So the goal is 2 pages to simply list every SOL strand that the kids are going to be doing in kid-friendly language. So that way they can understand, here's what I need to learn. As we go through our tests, the students pull out their data notebooks, and after each test, all they have to do is hit the Skills Mastery tab in Edulastic, and it already shows them, here are the SOL strands that were on your test. Here is your percentage of mastery for each strand. You can see on the right, I have less than 60% is failing, 60 to 79% is pass, and above an 80% is mastery. The kids will then write their percentage in the appropriate column for the appropriate strand. Okay. Thank you, Harry, and I agree. It's not about more data. It's about having data that's applicable to the students and having them understand how to use it. That's what this is all about. All right, so this helps the students. Go ahead to the next slide. Because they are learning what they were expected to learn. It's not just sort of a vague, oh, I took a test on the executive branch. They know, okay, here are the strands of the executive branch and what I was supposed to learn. From the teacher point of view, you can look at the standards-based report in Edulastic and look from a grade or a class-wide perspective. Does my class need reteaching? Do they need remediation on this skill? Are we mastered and ready to go? Okay, next slide. So how the students use this is throughout the year, they fill in their data chart. Additionally, there's a page with a bar graph where they keep track of their actual test scores. And there's a reflection page where they can keep track of what they need to retest, why they think they did excellently or poorly on a particular test, just to get them reflecting and thinking more about future habits. At the end of the year, I collect the data notebooks from them, and I use that in addition to their end of the year benchmark test. And I set up rotations for end of the year test review. So if you have mastered most of the strands on your data notebook, if you've passed the end of the year benchmark, you don't need a lot of intense remediation for the end of the year test. So I put those students in an extension group. They are given a choice of several extension projects, writing a children's book about our topic, making a photo scavenger hunt, things like that. And they go off and work on their own. The other 2 groups rotate from day to day as we review specific content for the end of the year test. If you are a student who's passed the material but hasn't necessarily mastered it, but you haven't failed it, then you need some review, but you don't necessarily need intense remediation. So those students get to work on their own independent practice. I use Socrative, quizzes, gym kit, things like that. Group 3 are the students that have shown through their data notebook or their end of the year test that they have failed the strands for that day's topic, and they need intense remediation. Those students sit with me at a small group table and we go through that day's topic. Everybody gets a participation grade for the day, just because I've found that if the students aren't being graded, they're not necessarily going to take it seriously, but it is an informative grade for the standards-based grading because, again, they're not showing mastery. But it's just something to keep them on track, and the students feel better about being at a table with me because they know just by participating in the reteaching, that's their grade for the day. Whereas the students that are working on their own, their grade is whatever they actually earn on that day's quizzes or Socrative test. Okay, next slide. I always want to harp on vertical alignment. Again, when you're in an English and a math perspective, it's not quite as crucial because you are being tested every year, and that's helpful. Vertical alignment for a data notebook would be super easy to set up, especially in the English perspective, because so many of the strands are nearly identical, just building on the mastery. For math, this would be great because, again, you are building in a natural logical sequence, but there are separate curriculums. Science, this would be really helpful for the middle school level because your 8th grade test is cumulative. So having this information as 6th and 7th grade, the students wouldn't have to remember 2 years worth of data when you're getting them ready for that 8th grade test. My 8th grade test is the only social studies test that they take at the middle school level, but thankfully it's not cumulative. They have alternative assessments they have to take in 6th and 7th grade history. But since I am so passionate about vertical alignment, I've worked with the rest of my department to build identical data notebooks for US 1 and US 2. The students are taught how to start tracking themselves in those grades. So that way, when they come to 8th grade, we can just jump right into using it. And I don't have to spend several days teaching them how to fill in the different columns and of the strands. They're used to seeing it and they're all in the same format. Okay, next slide. So I wanted to make sure you guys realize it's not just taking my word for it, because again, as teachers, we can always think, oh yeah, this is working great, look at my scores, but what do the kids think? So when I did this as my professional growth plan, part of that evidence was giving the students surveys throughout the year, asking them, if you were to take the SOL tomorrow, how confident are you that you would pass? And as you can see from these screenshots of the 3 times that I gave the survey, at the very beginning of the year, more than half the kids said I would definitely fail it, and almost the entire rest of the half said maybe I'd pass it, but just barely. Once we hit January, there's still a third of the kids that say, oh, I'd probably still fail it, but 2/3 of the students are confident they'll pass, not by much. Some are solidly going to pass. By the end of the year, no one's going to fail it. Only a very small fraction think they're just going to pass. Most are solidly, and almost half of the class is confident they're going to get pass advanced. My actual results for the year were a 97% pass rate with 63% pass advanced. So it really matched with how the students felt that they were going to do. And that's when I realized, okay, this does work. This is something where the students are learning and taking ownership of that learning, so that they go into the test feeling more confident. And they definitely said that the Edulastic format, where you can have the test nav, what's the word, Alyssa? Where it looks like test nav. I can't think of the word. Anyway, the
Sorry,
tests
I'm blanking too,
That's okay. The tests look like test nav if that's what you pick. And so they come into the test and it looks exactly like what you've been doing all year. And in most cases, the students tell me, oh, Miss Merrill, like your tests were harder than that was, which is what I'm going for. All right, I think there's one more slide. So I also asked this, oh, there we go. So I asked the students, how well do you feel like you understand what you had to master? So they got 4.10 out of 5, understanding what they were supposed to have been learning that year. And then I said, just be honest, what did you think about the notebook? Ah, thank you, Natalia, interface. So most of them said they hated the reflection portion of the data notebook. They just wanted the numbers on there. They hated the reflection portion, but they liked the data. The purple bar, so that's the red bar in the middle. The green bar said it had its pluses and minuses, but overall they do think that it helped them understand what they had to do. And then the purple said they loved seeing it and wished their other teachers did it too. So I had only a few students that had this, or that had the lower and didn't like it at all. So I do have my civics one that I'm going to pop a link in the chat that you are welcome to download and edit to your heart's content. Again, I apologize, I don't have one ready for ELA or math, but again, it's not a very Pinterest perfect file. It's very easy to adapt for whatever you'd like to do it. And I'm happy to take any questions. I think that's the last slide, Jenna.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. All right, we can move on to the next slide, please. Awesome. Next up, we have Nicholas Hamilton. Nicholas is a high school social studies teacher. Nick, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Hi, nice to meet you, everybody. I'm coming at Virginia as an outsider. I've been in the state for less than a year, but I've previously been in Ohio for about 7 years. Go ahead, next slide, Jenna, if you don't mind. as an educator, Harry pointed out, more data isn't always better. And I will steal Aaron's idea of the data notebooks. That's pretty neat. Um, I always try to keep data. The way I approach it is like, I hate to put it in terms of like fighting a battle, but on social studies, so it's kind of fits. Maybe fighting a fire. It's where do we put the most of our energy as a whole group during instruction. So with Edulastic, it helps me set up the year with a pretest. I always start off with a pretest, and my colleagues back in Ohio have used, in science and math, they always use a pretest to kind of set us on the right track of where we want to head. It helps me dictate the speed and type of material I can use. If students need a lot of basic facts, I can focus more on the note side of things. If I think they've got the vocabulary and the facts, we can focus more on the bigger concepts and skills. So it helps out. Go ahead, next slide, Jenna. Because social studies is such a heavy vertically aligned course, especially the world and American histories, I try to focus on the bigger skills. So like historical reading, how to tear into historiography, concepts, how this cause and effect, research, items like that. Working with primary and secondary sources, and then really getting down the nitty gritty. So Edulastic helps me identify these bigger gaps that students need in skills, maybe from previous social studies courses. As soon as I do a pretest and I figure out where we're going, I hate to be a stickler, but I do kick out. I give at least a 10-question quiz every week, every Friday, and the kids expect it. They do it. They roll with it. At least because I don't want to overtest my kids. I know that's a big thing in the education world, is these kids feel like they're over-tested. I will roll out a test maybe once or twice in 9 weeks, call it a midterm, put a name on it and roll with it. But the quizzes with Edulastic are able to give me really good insights in these small snippets where I don't have to overtest the students all the time. The standards-based reporting, like Aaron uses, helps the students see when we go over it in class as a whole group where they lie on certain concepts or ideas like ancient Greece, or maybe the scientific revolution, things like that. When we look at standards based for students, this will help with remediation later. Go ahead, next slide. So at the end of class, I take all of our time that we build into our pacing charts for remediation, and I typically save them for the end. If students look like they're on track to go through a concept or a unit pretty quickly, I may take a day and just throw it on to the end as well. And when we reach this end of time for our course, right before the SOL, we take a post test, and it's the exact same test as before. I don't change anything at all. Usually I try to use the released items from the test library from Virginia Department of Ed, and that helps me identify where our biggest needs of concern are. So I've got a picture up there in red. These are the standards that really need to hit with our last test that we took. So as we get at this remediation time, if they identify these on the end of the post test, then what we'll do is this is where we'll focus our fight. I'll split up kids. We will have half the class is usually individual work or one-on-one or small group. So I'll shoot out specific ed puzzles or specific notes, review 2 students that might not need what the rest of the class needs, but this is a great way to guide my review and how we are going to approach the study for the SOL, the study portion. Go ahead, next slide, Jenna. So what I've learned in Virginia since arriving here is there was a massive sticker shock. not just with all the taxes that the state has. That was surprising. But with the test, when I arrived, someone in my department said, well, they passed my SOL, they don't need to take your SOL. And I stood there and I thought for a minute. I was like, well, that's weird. If you guys have ever taught in some other states, you might identify what I'm talking about. In Ohio, students had one science, 2 social studies, 3 English, and 3 math end of course exams is what we called them back there. And you had to pass each one in order to graduate high school. There was no, you pass the government, you're off clean for the American history. You just have to pass the course. It was, you take that class, you get the grade, you must also pass the EOC. Okay, Virginia was the same at one time. I imagine it may go back. So those of us that have been in this situation, we might be ready for it more than maybe some of the newer teachers entering. I think Edulastic will really help out getting students ready. Another problem that I've ran into. So not only the importance of passing this SOL, is kind of skewed because it's like, well, if I miss yours, I'll just get the next one. But one of the other problems I ran into was Department of Ed in Virginia doesn't release a lot of materials all the time. So the last released material I had to use was from 2014. And when you're trying to go over a test in 2022, it's a little difficult. So I was able to find an Edulastic where people have modeled questions that were going to be very similar to what my readouts from the last SOL were. So I've aligned my test a little bit more with that, made them a little bit harder, like Aaron said, and they've helped out a lot more. It seemed like they weren't as skill-based as some other states. It was more fact-based. Also in Virginia, students seem to have been in virtual a lot longer than what I was used to. When my last year in Ohio, we were fully in person. So my students here have had an extra year of virtual that I wasn't used to. So we had some classroom management behaviors to kind of rein in a little bit. Things like cell phone use, being able to walk away from a test and do something else and come back to it. And it's like, hey, as we're taking this quiz, and with Edulastic, you're able to set it. They can't jump off of your quiz necessarily without being warned or having it shut down. So it kind of reins them in some more, which I like. That kind of gets us back in the routine of learning. But as we go through this, I hope things are turning around here and kind of going to go back to normal for us. Some things have changed for the better, I believe, and digital content, I think, is definitely one that has changed and needs to stay. Next slide, please, Jenna. So things that I've learned and things I've been able to see with Edulastic pretty quickly and change in a semester have been, I need more quizzes. We need more high impact lessons with just content. And the changes with classroom behaviors, keeping kids on tasks on what they need to be doing. And also because students could walk away during virtual every 15 minutes. I change pace every 15 minutes. It's like we're doing something different in class usually. And that's helped out a lot. So you can see this is our last test, 81%, the least proficient on the SOL level. Also, something that was different, I don't believe the passing score is the same as it was now, but on the 2014 released item test, it was like a 48% students had to have. So I was used to teaching with a 75% passing rate. So we had to fight a little bit harder with that. But I do believe, you can get the next slide if that's fine. With the insights and the summaries that Edulastic gives that feedback on, we've been able to identify what we need in class, focus as a whole group where to go. And I think Aaron's data binders might help us out a little bit more. Kids make it a little bit more personal for them instead of everybody in the class. But it's been a great way to kind of take us into where we need to go, and then hopefully we keep continuing this good fight. And this is something I think would help math and science just as easy as it does history and social studies. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicholas. All right, we're going to jump on into the next slide, please, Jenna. All right, before we move on to our Q&A, I want to point out some of Edulastic's features that are especially useful for Virginia testing. So you can see the parallels here without even using a player skin. Students can practice with very similar, if not the same tools. I will go ahead and drop a link in the chat for more premium and free Edulastic tools available, as well as some additional information on Virginia state testing. All right, we can jump to the next slide, please. All right, you will also find some ready to go Edulastic practice assessments on the Virginia State testing page on our website. I did drop that link in the chat as well. It is the last link of the previous message if you want to go head over there and check them out. Next, please. All right, I encourage you to check out some of our additional resources. We have the Teacher Training Hub, which includes live and on-demand trainings, swag requests for events, and more. The Distance Learning Hub is a great place to get tips on making the transition from in-person to remote instruction with Edulastic. The Facebook community is where you can chat with other educators using Edulastic. The Help Center is where you can find tutorials, step-by-step instructions, and more for commonly asked questions. And finally, the Edulastic blog has assessment best practices, featured assessments, events, and more. I'm going to go ahead and drop the links to all of those resources in the chat for you. All right, and they are now in the chat. You can please go ahead and check them out at your leisure. Okay, next slide, please, Jenna. All right, now we're going to open up to our Q&A and discussion with our presenters. So drop any questions you have left over in the question box so we can be sure to address them. As you're typing, I'm going to start off our Q&A session by asking our presenters some quick questions about their Edulastic preferences. I'm going to start with you, Erin. How often do you use pre-made versus your own Edulastic assessments?
So when I first started using Edulastic, I sort of focused on making my own. I would take all of my paper tests, and I spent a good year taking all of my paper tests and putting them in Edulastic. Since then, I've been alternating between them. I love the DOE released items and pop those in every now and then, and that's really helped me develop writing my own questions in a better style as well. There are so many visual graphic style questions and the technology enhanced items that I couldn't do on a paper-based system that I love doing now in Edulastic.
Awesome, thank you, Erin. Nicholas, which one do you prefer, pre-made or your own assessments?
Definitely being an outsider, pre-made. If I can find some good information that mimics the SOLs the other teachers have pre-made, I do use those too. The pre and post tests are usually the pre-made DOE released SOL items.
Mm-hmm. Nice, thank you. All right, I have another question for you both. What is your favorite Edulastic premium feature?
Mine is definitely the read aloud. Again, having been a former ELA teacher, you very often had a co-teacher or an inclusion teacher coming in who could take care of the special ed accommodations like read aloud in small group. We don't get that in social studies and science. So I used to have to beg for someone to come read aloud to my students, or even pull some of them into a tiny corner of my room while the other 25 kids were testing. And now that I have read aloud, I can give it to any student who wants it. It's not necessarily an accommodation, and the kids can do it discreetly and pull out their headphones. And that is my favorite thing.
Yes, I love read aloud. It is an awesome tool, especially for special education. What about you, Nicholas?
Definitely the read aloud. I hate to piggyback off of Aaron, but it's very important to mimic that portion of the SOL for inclusion purposes. I teach very heavily with UDL, so that helps out. But the safe browser, I think, is helped out a lot as well.
Yes.
Yes, and for those of you that are relatively new to Edulastic, the safe browser feature is one of our anti-cheating premium tools that is available with that upgrade. All right. All right, while we're waiting for any last minute questions, I will throw this one out there. What advice would you give to anyone who is brand new to Edulastic?
Do you have anything while I think, Nicholas?
Use it.
What do you wish that you had known when you started Edulastic? I'll phrase it that way.
How easy it was.
I think I wish I'd known about the different types of questions.
Mhm.
I was coming into it from a very multiple choice or short answer standpoint, and there are so many more options available.
Yeah, like the drag and drops and yeah. I think being able to do that and to make these questions, even when I do make my own and make them like this, to get this feedback, and it makes, if we're going to do more as teachers, I feel like we should take something else off of our plate, and this does that.
Yeah.
I'm able to be a better teacher with Edulastic and without a lot of extra work.
Yes, this is awesome. All right, we do have a question in the chat here. If Aaron or Nicholas, either of you can take this up. How do students see their scores by standard? I think Aaron, you showed this in the beginning.
Well, and so I had the teacher view. I wasn't able to get a screenshot of the student view from Edulastic. And I don't know if Alyssa, you have any way of showing the dashboard from a student view.
I will go ahead and search.
So while she's searching, from the student view, there is a dashboard where you would see all of the assigned tests. And then right below it, there is a skills mastery where they can select any of their classes from a drop menu. And then it automatically takes them to whatever strands have been tagged for those questions. So if you're pulling pre-made questions that are released, they're already tagged with the strand. If you're building your own, that's just part of the information you can give to a question. You can put the Bloom's taxonomy, and then you can put the SOL strand.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. And I did find our help article on this, so I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the chat for you if you want to read a little bit more about our real-time student responses in our live class board. All right, it looks like this one is also for our presenters here. How easy is it to build your own questions?
Yeah, it's pretty easy to go into, and if a lot of times the problem that I've run into is if I use somebody else's question, they may be wrong, and then the students will point it out for you, and they'll say, hey, so it's easier if you go in instead of just using somebody's question. If maybe you're short on time, or you think they match up better with the standard here in Virginia, you can take the question and edit it, make it your own, duplicate the question, and it's the same as creating one, and you can go in and put the information there correctly and choose the right answer for whatever system you do.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicholas. And I do see one quick question that I missed up here. Your grades, the students' grades can be synced into their Google Classroom. They will show up there automatically as long as you are synced through Google Classroom from the start. I can go ahead and find the help link to drop that in the chat as well so that you have that information.
And if you use Canvas like Virtual Virginia does, we also use PowerSchool. the Edulastic will sync right into Canvas and it'll flow right into PowerSchool. So as soon as the student's done with the test and I release scores, it goes straight into PowerSchool. So it's the syncing feature is excellent.
Great. Okay, it looks like we are just about wrapping up here in the Q&A box in the chat. If you have any school specific or district-wide questions that you would like to ask me personally, you can email me. I will go ahead and drop it in the chat. It's alyssa@edulastic.com. If you have any questions about your account, you could go ahead and email our support team or visit our help center. You will be able to find step-by-step instructions there as well.